This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome to another episode of the No Huddle Show, our Philadelphia Eagles podcast for NJ.com. This is Cayden Steele, and joining me today will be my co-host Bob Brookover. We're on the eve of the Eagles' first training camp practice, and we have much to discuss, from starting competitions to roster long shots. Tonight's episode is going to be brought to you by Penco Tech. With two convenient campuses in Blackwood, New Jersey, and in Bristol, Pennsylvania, Penco Tech has provided comprehensive, hands-on career training for more than 50 years, featuring programs in HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and automotive technology, and more. With dedicated instructors and career placement assistants, Penco Tech can give you the skills and confidence to build a brighter future. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Learn more and take the first step by going to pencotech.edu. Let's get right into it, Bob. Training camp starts tomorrow. There's a lot of things to look forward to, but the most important thing is the three starting jobs that are available. The safety competition with Andrew Mukuba, Sidney Brown, Vic Fangio even threw Tristan McCullum's name out there. We got a rookie versus a third-year player versus Tristan McCullum, who's mainly been a special teams player, only been on an active roster for one season. And then we got the guard battle with Tyler Steele versus the field of, Matt Pryor, the veteran who started his career with the Eagles, who's coming off the best year of his career with the Bears. And then you got Kenyon Green, the reclamation project from the Texans. And then also on the defensive side in the secondary, the Eagles lost Darius Slay this offseason. Now we got a battle between Keely Ringo, the third-year corner with all the physical traits in the world, versus Adoree Jackson, the 9-year veteran who's played a ton of good starting football as a starting corner in the NFL. Of those three battles that we're about to watch, what one do you think is the most wide open?
Oh, the most wide open. I would. Wow, that's I like the way you described the guard battle as being Tyler Steele against the field. I would say that one is the most wide open because a year ago we sat here at this time with Tyler Steele as the leader as we went into training camp to win that job. He didn't win it, obviously. Mekhi Becton ended up winning it, changed the course of his career. Tyler Steele became a valuable backup who played some really important snaps for the Eagles last year. But now he's got another chance to nail down the position and some interesting competition to go along with that. Matt Pryor had maybe his best season in the NFL with the Bears last year in a mostly starting role. Green is a former number one pick that the Eagles traded away one of their most valuable defensive players in Chauncey C.J. Gardner Johnson. And I still find there to be some intrigue in the Trevor Keegan part of this because he didn't play a whole lot last year, but we just don't know a whole lot. I don't think we know a whole lot about how the Eagles feel about Trevor Keegan. The only game he got into was the last game of the season against the Giants. He didn't even start that game. But, it's his second year. He does come from where he was a captain of a national championship team that went 15-0. So that's still there. He doesn't have the size these other guys have. But to get back to your question, that's the one that seems the most wide open to me. That maybe more than, if you mean by more wide open, could there be more than one guy who ends up seizing that job? Yeah, I could see that. So that to me is the most intriguing one.
Yeah, and we really don't know what Tyler Steele has, to him. You mentioned he lost the starting job to Mekhi Becton last year. got hurt early in training camp and really fell behind. And Kai, played so well, especially in the run game last year. Tyler Steele really had no chance after that to overtake him. But we don't know whether he's good or whether he's bad. He's a complete unknown. And Matt Pryor does have a lot of experience. And for the most part, he's not been a great NFL player, but he is coming off uh, one of the best years of his career, probably the best year of his career. And he knows Jeff Stoutland. He's familiar with Lane Johnson. So he's got a realistic shot of winning that job. So I agree with you that thing is pretty open. If I had to go with another battle that I think is somewhat open, I don't know if it's as open as Tyler Steen, but as much as I like Keely Ringo's potential, and he did look good in OTs and minicamp, and uh, whatever that means, because they're not wearing full pads and it's not very physical, but he did look pretty smooth out there as an outside starting corner when he got those reps. But Adoree Jackson's played a lot of football in the NFL. He's very experienced, and I know he didn't play as much with the Giants last year and didn't have full time starter snaps, but he still graded out pretty well on Pro Football Focus. And throughout his career, he's been a pretty steady player, never like truly amazing, but steady. And Keely Ringo is still a really, really young player, and corner's tough to play. And we don't really know, what Keely Ringo is going to be. Obviously, he has a lot of talent. He's got the size and the speed and all those different things, but we'll have to see how much better he is technique wise, how much better he is from a mental acuity aspect of football. And I think Keely Ringo should probably win that job. And I'm sure they want, a guy they traded a future third round pick for 2 years ago to move up early in the fourth round to take him to be the guy. But I wouldn't count out Adoree Jackson winning that starting job, or at least playing at some point this year if Keely Ringo struggles, just because of the experience. Maybe it's an Isaiah Rodgers situation where he's the cornerback 4, but he does, get some decent amount of playing time. So that's one I think is open. Of these three battles that we're going to be really keeping our eye on, is there one where you think a guy's heavily favored to win the job?
I, I would say no. I don't. I don't think there is one where there's a guy who's heavily favored. You just talked about the Adoree Keely Ringo battle, and I think Keely is the favorite in that one. But I've seen Adoree Jackson play some really good football when I was covering the Giants. I saw him essentially shut down Justin Jefferson with the help of Julian Love and Xavier McKinney. Now you're talking about two pretty good safeties there helping do that. But I saw him uh, play really good football for the Giants in 2022. Now we're removed from that. He did grade out pretty well. And this is my scouting report was strictly based on people I covered the Giants with, talking to about Adoree last year, and one of them told me, "Oh, he's stealing money." Um, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see what Adoree Jackson has left in the tank, and maybe what is if he can be rejuvenated by being with a team, being a contending team for the first time really for him in a few years. He really hasn't played with a contender a whole lot in his career. Did some in Tennessee, but he seemed genuinely excited about being in a position maybe to win a Super Bowl for the first time in his career. And what that does for a player, it's gotta uplift them to some extent. Then you go to the safety. I think maybe Andrew Makuba is a little bit of a favorite there too, but not an overwhelming one by any means. It certainly helped his cause that the second round pick thing that was going on all summer, not signing, that all caved in at the end, and they all came to some kind of compromise in terms of guaranteed money. It helps him that he's going to be in camp right away. That would have been a serious detriment to him if he hadn't been in camp on time. And he's the slight favorite, but uh, to me, very slight. I mean, Sidney Brown is a very determined player. He was a good special teamer. He might not be a great coverage guy, but he's got some. He's a headhunter in a lot of ways, and that's maybe not a politically correct term in today's NFL. But he's a guy who goes after people. We saw it, a few times, a little bit. I think it was the Dallas game where he got into it at the end of the game. He got on the field for plays when they were blowing the Cowboys out, and he likes to be right in the middle of it. And if he's not going to win the job, he's not going to lose it laying down. He's going to be fighting like hell to win that job. So those are three great competitions, and I really, like you said, it should be a lot of fun to watch and see how it all evolves throughout training camp and the preseason.
When it comes to Makuba, when I think about his chances of winning the starting job, I feel like he would have to struggle pretty badly to lose it. Maybe that that's not true, but because of the draft pedigree of going in the second round, uh, if this battle is anywhere close or if it's about even, I wonder if they just give Makuba the nod. Uh, do they take him in the second round if they truly believe Sidney Brown is a surefire starter or going to be the starter? Probably not. And another thing is, that Vic has, personnel, influence, especially with the cachet that he has and the experience, and sure he has Howie's ear. So if he's targeting Andrew Makuba as the safety that he likes in the draft or one of them, it makes you think that, unless Andrew Makuba goes out and he shows that he's just not ready, or if he suffers an injury in training camp and he misses a couple of weeks, maybe like Cooper DeJean last year did, I do feel like he is probably a good, heavy favorite over Sidney Brown. Do you feel the same way? Do you feel like it's really like Makuba would have to really struggle for him to lose it? Like if it's even between him and Sidney Brown or even close, do you think Makuba gets the nod?
Well, it's a good point that he is Vic's guy,
Yeah.
and Sidney is not so much Vic's guy. Although, uh, you know, Vic was a consultant when the Eagles drafted. I don't know the exact timeline on when Vic was hired as a consultant. I know he was a consultant that year. Uh, you know, yeah, I think he's the favorite. Yeah, but I don't think it's a slam dunk that. And I think it helps that he's Vic guy, and that means he obviously liked what he saw, and he wanted the Eagles to draft that guy. He was, when they said, "Is this a guy you like?" and he gave the nod, yes. That helps Makuba, but you still got to prove it on the field. And I, and for me, some of this goes back to 2023 when I thought it was inconsistent. It was up and down, but I thought Sidney Brown really had some terrific moments as a rookie before the last game of the season. He was playing a lot, and he was going to play in that playoff game. And then I guess it was broken. Was it torn ACL? I guess it was torn ACL
Mhm.
against the Giants. But earlier in the year, he returned to how far was it? 98 yards touchdown or a long return? I don't remember exactly how many yards. He showed up. He showed up a lot during that, and now how much of him not showing up as much last year had to do with it probably had to do with a lot of things. Coming back from the injury, C.J. Gardner Johnson was back, so there wasn't a chance to play as much. All those things. But it'll be fascinating to see what he has left. There's not one of these battles that I'm not intrigued by. I'm intrigued by all of them.
Yeah, and the last point on Makuba that I have that you brought up that does go in his favor, and I think will help in this battle is the fact that his scouting report is that he's just a natural coverage guy. I think he has a little more range than Sidney Brown, and he had 5 interceptions at Texas last year. They're looking to replace C.J. Gardner Johnson, who got traded to the Texans, who had 6 interceptions in both of his seasons for the Eagles. So if Makuba is just a little more better in coverage, especially going deep. Whereas Sidney Brown does some of his best work, coming downhill near the line of scrimmage. I do wonder if that's what's going to separate them. But even if Sidney doesn't win the starting job, because Makuba has nickel versatility, because generally Vic Fangio likes versatility in his DBs, you wonder if he still gets some playing time as a third safety in some type of role in defense for certain packages. But as we're talking about these young guys, that's because there's a lot of them. This team is still pretty young. They got a lot of rookies coming in, a big rookie class with Jahad Campbell and Andrew Makuba and just Ty Robinson. The list goes on. They had a ton of picks in this year's draft, and then last year's class of Cooper DeJean, and Quentin Mitchell, and Jalix Hunt, Will Shipley, and then even even the year before where they hit on Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. They have a lot of different young guys. Of the players that, are third year or under, who are the two young guys, that you're most excited to see their development training camp and like what they look like in terms of like their performance and growth and all of that?
Um, obviously Jihad Campbell was the team's number one pick. A lot of people thought he was a top 10 pick, at least a top 15. He slipped to the Eagles all the way at 31. So obviously I'm eager to see him because I don't I don't know where he fits right now. If he's more of an edge rusher or Vic played him at middle linebacker in the well, he didn't really play him at all because he didn't get a chance to run on the field because he's coming off surgery uh, from their bowl game. But he worked him in terms of mentally more at inside linebacker. Um, but N'Kobe Dean's doing his best to come back, and Jihad Campbell's not going to be handed that job. So, I'm going to be fascinated to see what Jihad Campbell's training camp is like, how soon he gets on the field. Uh, he certainly falls into that category of young guys I can't wait to see. DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, you have to be excited to see them. What they were so good in year one. Can they get better? If they can get better, the sky's the limit for this defense. If they do get better, and then the other, the same way. And Jalen Carter's the third. Has Jalen Carter become, does he ascend to superstar level? He's already on the verge of being a superstar. But does he? He said his goal is to be the best at that position. That's a really high bar in this league with Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence and some others. So eager to see that. And then perhaps the most important piece of this entire Eagles defense is what do they have at edge rusher? What is Nolan Smith in year 3? What is J.L.X. Hunt in year 2? That's going to go a long way toward determining whether this Eagles defense can be as elite as it was last season or anywhere close to as elite it was last season.
Yeah, and for that reason, I'm going to stick with the guys I'm most excited for are the defensive linemen. And where they get a lot of interior pass rush was from Jalen Carter last year, was from Milton Williams, but also very underrated and not as talked about because the snap count wasn't very high, was Moro Ojoma, who's going into his third year. And at this point, as a seventh round pick in 2023, seems like a significant steal, even on the limited snaps he's played. Second highest pass rush win rate of any interior defensive tackle last year. And like I said, keep in mind, it's on a lower snap count, but 18.2%, only lower than Chris Jones from the Chiefs. And yes, he's getting a lot of one-on-ones and things like that. But I mean, Morajoma has a pass rush bag for an interior defensive lineman with more snaps, and Jalen Carter still demanding double teams, and Jordan Davis clogging up holes, and him, getting some favorable matchups. This is a guy that could really break out, maybe even be potentially better than Milton Williams, and could go down as one of the Eagles' best day 3 picks in a long time. I'm excited to see what steps that he takes, and it's important for him to take that step because, like you said, Bob, we really don't know what edge rusher is with after Nolan Smith really. Maybe Ezekiel Jalari and Josh Uche become good rotational guys, and then they're going to have to rely on J.L.X. Hunt, and that's the second guy that I am most excited to see. The Super Bowl performance was impressive. It was encouraging. Dominated Joe Tooney at times. That looked like a player that has the chance to develop into a star pass rusher, but again, the sample size, similar to Ojomo, is really small. And this is a guy that's only been playing edge rusher going into his 4th year in general ever of football playing edge rusher because he was a safety at Cornell. But you think with the physical ability that he has and the fact that he's already, shown the flashes that he has early in his career without the experience, you would think that he's going to take the next step potentially. And maybe his ceiling's even higher than Nolan Smith. So those are the two guys that I'm so excited to see. And yeah, it's because this team needs their defensive line. They needed it last year. This team has always been built through the front, and they need those two guys to really break out to be as dominant as they were on defense. All the guys that we talked about are going to be core members of this team in some way or another this year. But let's talk about the guys that are going to try to fight their way onto the defending Super Bowl champs. This is a team that's really deep. Not every single player that has NFL experience or is promising is going to crack the roster. Some of these guys will end up on the practice squad or maybe on another team or even potentially out of the league. When you look at this roster, which is, I think, even still after all the losses in free agency, it's still fairly deep. Bob, who are some of those players on the bubble that you're most curious to see how their status shapes up throughout the summer?
Oh, well, you mentioned a couple a second ago. I don't know if they're on the bubble, but like Josh Uche and Aziz, they got to show something. They've had moments in the NFL, but if they don't show it now, um, there's younger players who can, let's for example say that Jihad Campbell. They did decide that Jihad Campbell can help us most by being an edge rusher this year. One of those guys could get shoved out. Let's say, for example, I mean, it seems like a long shot, but what J.Alex Hunt did, and I know it didn't start till late in the season last year. Nobody saw that coming, and it's particularly that Super Bowl performance. He was frankly super that day. Maybe an Antoine Powell Ryland can surprise us all. He's obviously a much later pick, but the numbers were incredible that he posted at Virginia Tech the last 2 years. So guys like that can push veteran guys out of the picture. A curious thing to be, we mentioned competition here, but if Adoree Jackson doesn't win the starting job, does he stick around? That's open for debate, I think. Veteran guys offensively, I don't see many, guys who you really think about. They don't really have too many guys like that, in my opinion, that are, well-known names who, you could say, Brett Toss on the bubble. I would say Brett Toss probably on his way out, but those aren't guys that people really think too much about. So that would be my list of significant guys. I think you mentioned A.J. Dillon as a guy on the bubble. Maybe I'm not sure. We split up the preview for this thing, and I think you've talked about that before. And you could be right, especially since he's coming off this neck injury. If he doesn't show, I mean, sometimes guys just show up after missing a year and it's not there anymore. But I thought he looked fine in OTAs and off-season workouts. I'd be surprised if he wasn't part of it all.
My thoughts on the whole AJ Dillon situation, and it is performance dependence, because if he does return from the injury, he will probably make this roster. He's their most proven option. They lost Kenneth Gainwell, but I don't know how he's going to look. Training camp for me will really tell the story. They didn't, pay him a lot of money, obviously, gave him a 1-year deal, so his status on this team is not secure. And then third, it's just the fact that, if they're able to save a little bit money, and if he doesn't look that much better than their undrafted free agent running backs, it opens a pathway for them. And one of the positions that it's easiest to adjust to the NFL as an undrafted guy is running back. We've seen undrafted running backs like, James Robinson, Philip Lindsay, and there's Gus Edwards. The list goes on and on of, solid starters or high-end backups being undrafted guys. And if Montrell Johnson Jr. or Shunderick Powell have a really good training camp and A.J. Dillon is not the same powerful, explosive runner that we saw at times in Green Bay, then I feel like the door is open. And before he even got hurt, he had the worst year of his career since his rookie season in terms of just production. He just didn't look the same even in 2023. There were some signs of him slowing down. And then the injury happened, so He's not one of the guys I'm feeling most likely gets cut, but he would be potentially the biggest name that I could see getting released. And then Bob, you also mentioned the edge rushers. One of those guys, if Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, show up to training camp, they don't look up to par. Especially Josh Uche, who seems to be on the decline the last 2 years. If it doesn't seem like the lights turning on, I could see the Eagles, releasing him and going to sign another pass rusher who's a free agent to replace him to get a different look at someone else. So those two names are big names in the NFL or have been before, but who knows what they're going to be going long term. And then another guy that uh, is he's not a big name, and they only spent a fifth round pick on him, but last year was Anais Smith. He had a really bad training camp last year, but showed some promise in that Week 18 game against the Giants. 7 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown. Uh, he's been spending some time with A.J. Brown this spring, as I saw on Instagram. So maybe uh, he bounces back and he finds his way onto this roster. A lot of people were excited about him just a year ago, but and in the wide receiver room's not very good. But just after the way he performed last year, I think he's one of those guys that's really fighting for a roster spot, and I don't know what way it's going to lean. And
Well, I'll disagree that the wide receiver room is not very good.
did I?
It's not very
Oh,
deep.
did I say? Oh, I said deep. That is definitely.
No, that's
I
all
used the
right.
wrong word. That
Yeah, 'cause it's a great wide receiver room, but but I agree with you. I think that's the point you're making is that it's not that deep. It's a little scary. Like if something happens to and last year those guys did miss some games for the first time in their career, and it showed when they were out. Especially when Dallas Goedert was also dealing with injuries. So the depth at all those positions is a little frightening. But I mean, I'm sure you can say that about some spot on every roster in the NFL. Like if we lose this guy, we're in trouble. So
yeah, and I'm curious if he gets the opportunity on special teams. That's what he was really known for at A&M as a returner. They brought in Avery Williams. That's another guy that I think is on the bubble. Nick Sirianni hyped him up at the owners' meeting like he's he's a secret weapon that they're going to use this year. So maybe his spot's more secure than I think. But I'm excited to see the potential battle for kick returner and punt returner, and whether Anais Smith gets mixed in there. Johnny Wilson as well. I feel like no one in the wide receiver room, like because it is relatively weak in terms of depth, is a lock. And I'm curious if they end up adding someone to that position. Another guy that I'll throw out before we move on to our roster long shots is Eli Ricks, who had a really solid rookie year, at least some moments as a rookie that you thought he could play corner in the NFL going forward. Then got buried with the Cooper DeJean and Quentin Mitchell sections. They got buried even more for Dory Jackson signing here this year, and then the Mac McWilliams selection in the 5th round. I think Eli Ricks can play in the NFL, but right now he's buried potentially even as low as cornerback 6. And if they don't keep 6 guys, I wonder if Eli Ricks' time with the Eagles is over.
yeah, and I agree with that, and I also wonder like could Mac McWilliams, there's always a guy, and I'd say it was probably Jalek's Hunt defensively last year, who ends up having more of an impact than you think he might when the season started. And could Mac McWilliams end up being that guy who, because he has the ability to play inside um, and outside. Um, he's a guy a rookie who will be interesting to watch in terms of whether he can make an impact as a rookie.
That's a great point. And I haven't even thought about what if the possibility is that, Keely Ringo really struggles on the outside, but they don't see enough from Adoree Jackson. Like it's clear that he's on the back end of his career, and they like the veteran presence, but they really don't want to throw him out there on outside corner. Is it a scenario where they move Cooper DeJean to just even more when they play base? And I know they don't play base a ton, but when they play base situations, would it be DeJean, Quentin Mitchell on the outside, and would Mac McWilliams do enough to be the nickel in those scenarios? So he's a player that definitely could crack the lineup and play more snaps, at least in a rotational role than I thought of. And then two, I mean, nickel corner is a spot we've seen some late round picks and some undrafted guys really make an impact. I mean, Kenny Moore and Mike Hilton and um, the list goes on and on. So Michael McWilliams as a day 3 pick could slide into that nickel spot. The only guy I could really other think of is like when he did play last year, I saw some flashes out of Thomas Booker. Does Gabe Hall push him this year? Um, but at that point, we're just kind of picking down the roster. But he's a player that I also am curious with, especially with them losing Milton Williams, if his snap count will go up or if someone will push him off the roster.
Yeah, I mean that certainly comes into play. I think just overall, and I know we're talking about guys on the roster bubble, but overall in the defense, there's just so much to watch in training camp to see how this thing's going to come together. Vic Fangio in the offseason, likened it to last year when there was a lot of unknowns, and he was right, and there were, and he and the Eagles and the defense were fortunate that the answers that they came up with were all positive almost across the board. Now, can they do it again? Uh, that seems unlikely to the level that they did it, but it's it's going to be fascinating to watch it all come together again, and that starts in training camp in the preseason. So it should be fun to watch that way.
Yeah, it's a lot of new pieces, and that's where really the intrigue lies. I know the offense, the intrigue lies with Kevin Patullo and his play calling, but they do have 10 of 11 starters back. Um, and the defense is just going to be so many new faces, more positions up for grab, even in the rotational edge rush, who's going to be that guy. They have so many different things to watch there. Every summer, though, another thing to watch is, even though it doesn't probably have a long-term effect on this team or really will help, is the long shots, your Paul Turners of the world, more guys than that that really come in, or Raheem Mostert was once in training camp for Eagles. Those long shots who maybe won't make the team, but that will bring the excitement to the fans at practices and at preseason games. Is there a guy, Bob, that you think will maybe steal the show this year? Will be your training camp long shot that steals the headlines, or at least is a fun conversation to have when it comes to August when the 53-man roster cut down comes.
Yeah, I don't think neither one of these guys are in danger of not making the roster, but the most fun thing I'm kind of looking forward to, and we're going to get to see a ton of it in the preseason, so it's a more reason to not so much daily practices, but when the games happen. I'm really looking forward to Kyle McCord versus Tanner McKee. I thought McCord looked very good in OTAs. We know Tanner McKee's looked great in the preseason, and he threw a touchdown every time he threw the ball last year. Wasn't a whole lot of times, uh, but in his small sample size, has looked terrific, and he looked good enough that the Eagles were comfortable trading Kenny Pickett in the offseason and elevating Tanner McKee to the number 2 spot. But that doesn't mean he's written in stone as the number 2 quarterback. Maybe he opens the year, but Kyle McCord's going to get a chance. I would guess in the preseason, they'll both be playing a half each during the preseason. Maybe we'll see if Dorian. I'm not even sure Dorian Thompson Robinson's going to get any snaps in the preseason. But that to me is a fun little competition, and eager to see McCord as a local kid play, and eager to see if Tanner McKee can take what he did impressively in a small sample size and take it to another level.
Yeah, McKee has obviously been really impressive the last 2 preseasons, and if he has another impressive preseason and plays well, if they sit their stars in Week 18, I'm sure the conversations about whether the Eagles can get a draft pick for him or a player back for him next offseason will continue to ramp up. And Kyle McCord has an opportunity to prove he's the future backup. I like both of those picks. For mine, I'll go a little more for the guys who I don't think will make the roster, but I have the potential to be fun. The one that is new is undrafted free agent Shaderick Powell, and this is for my Boston Scott affinity, for the fact that this guy is kind of like a replica. He's 5'7", 183, like very short, very stout, like that size, typically is an outlier at the NFL, but we've seen some running backs with that size before make it, including smaller guys like Boston Scott. And I think Shanderick Powell probably won't make the roster, but maybe he'll do enough in training camp to secure a practice squad spot over a guy like Lou Nichols, and be someone who's fun to track. I mean, he had a very productive college career. He averaged 8.2 yards per carry last year and was named an FCS All American. So lower level competition at Central Arkansas, but had a ton of success. And I think he'll just be fun watching. It might be hard to see sometimes when he does, break out for a run through an offensive lineman because he's so short. So that's one. And then another guy is Laken Vakalahi, the offensive tackle from New Zealand, who has less rugby experience than Jordan Mailata had. They signed him last year as a part of the International Pathway Program. Um, I'm curious just to see, has he gotten better at football? And to expect another Jordan Mailata is probably unfair, but Jeff Stoutland, his ability to develop offensive linemen, you wonder if Laken can maybe at least develop into an eventual backup, and that would be a huge success story if they can get him to be a swing tackle one day, maybe a year or two down the line. It won't be this year, but how much has he gotten better? Does he have a future in the NFL? I mean, that's a guy I want to see. Does he look like he's knowing what he's doing more? When he's doing one-on-ones, does he look comfortable? I'm excited to see Lakin.
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points. I was going to get back to you, and you're right that it's going to be a topic of discussion if if McCord plays well and who am I thinking of here? McKee. If McKee plays well and McCord both play well in training camp, one of them being traded is going to be resurfaced as a topic of discussion. And the Eagles have a fascinating history of trading quarterbacks and getting second round picks for nobody. I mean, they got a second round pick from Miami for AJ Feely, who had barely played. They got a second round pick for Kevin Cobb, who had barely played. They got higher picks for I think for Feely and Cobb than they did for Donovan McNabb. Although Donovan McNabb, they also I think got a third round pick, but they got higher second round picks. So they have a fascinating history of trading quarterbacks. And that topic will definitely come up because if you have somebody that a team thinks they can turn into a starter, and it might not happen this year, but we saw it essentially with Kenny Pickett. They got him for 1 year and traded him. I thought they might have given up a lot more than they should have last year. But you know what? Kenny Pickett came in when he had to. He played a good game against the Commanders, nearly beat them after Jalen Hurts went out in that game. And then the following week, he beat the Cowboys with the help with the relief of Tanner McKee. But he played well enough in the first half to win an NFC. They clinched the NFC East that day. So there's a fascinating history of the Eagles trading quarterbacks. So I like that point you made.
And who knows? Maybe I doubt, but maybe it happens this summer if Kyle McCord is lights out. Maybe they get a good enough offer. It would probably take an injury to another team starter to get an offer, and who knows how the league evaluates Tanner McKee because the sample size is small, but that would be something that is fascinating if we see a starting quarterback or two go down in training camp with either a season-ending injury or a longer-term injury where for a team that doesn't have confidence in their backup. The last point that I want to bring up today, Bob, is just generally, I mean, I'm excited for training camp. I know you're excited for training camp. There's a lot to pay attention to. What do you think just overall is the key for this team in training camp? What do they need to accomplish? What do you need to see? And what do you think would be, I guess, just a successful training camp for the Eagles?
Always the answer to that is staying healthy, as you just pointed out. If your quarterback goes down in training camp, then you're scrambling for help there. But that's always the key. But I hate that answer because it's just a fact of life. But to me, the key for this team, for this Eagles team, is I actually think that the offense needs to go to an even higher level this year. And how exactly that happens, I don't know. Obviously, they relied a tremendous amount on Saquon Barkley last year. We've gotten through this whole podcast without mentioning Saquon Barkley, who was the whole focus of last offseason. I mean, last season, and like it never ended through the season. But I'm just really curious to see where Jalen Hurts' game goes from here. He silenced critics, like absolutely silenced critics, but they still exist. There's still people who think, he. Yeah, I saw a podcast the other day. I don't even know who it was. I forget who it was, but it's like, well, they weren't very good when they were relying on Jalen Hurts, and then they started handing the ball off after they started 2-2. And like, well, you're missing the point there. There was a game against Pittsburgh where the Steelers said we're going to shut down Saquon Barkley, and Jalen Hurts said, yeah, well, okay, go ahead, but we're still going to beat you this way. And then they were certainly not paying any attention to the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl when Jalen Hurts was just, a superstar on the field. But I'm curious to where he takes that confidence. And, he's always been confident in himself, but, and takes his game in his fifth season as a starter. It seems like he has the type of personality, and I think I'm going to write about this for the morning when this pod for the opening of training camp. He just seems to have, to me, the perfect personality, the Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter. If I can cut your throat off to win this game, if I have to cut your throat off, I'm going to cut your throat off. That he has that mentality, and he's the guy who can take the offense to another level. He still has a ton of weapons around him. And I think that's the key to this training camp and this season, that Jalen Hurts takes his game to an even higher level, to the point where, the last of the critics and non-believers are just beaten down so bad that they just crawl under the rug and go away forever.
Yeah, in this discussion, people do forget that Jalen Hurts finished second in MVP voting in 2022, and if he didn't get hurt at the end of that year and miss a couple games, maybe he would have won that award. That was a pass offense that was a lot better than last year. And then in the big moments, he has done it. Is the play always consistent? No, it's a little up and down at times, but he consistently shows up in big moments. But the conversation around him this year will be fascinating, especially if the offense evolves and it's a little more pass happy with Kevin Patullo. I'm curious to see whether he finally maybe gets a little more of the respect that you think he deserves, that, and I think he deserves as well, or whether the bias, or maybe I don't know if it's bias necessarily, but he was a second round pick. I wonder how much that impacts him when it comes to these quarterback rankings that have all the first round picks above him. I'm just curious how the narrative for him changes throughout his career. But that's all the time that we have for today. Starting with training camp coming up, we're going to have this episode coming out, and then we're going to start doing a daily, or not daily, but a weekly episode each week recapping training camp, and that will go through the season. We should have about one podcast per week for NJ.com. Thanks for everyone tuning in. We always appreciate your support, and make sure to go on to NJ.com to read our written stories as well, with training camp beginning and the season coming very soon. Thank you very much, and catch you guys next time.